Hello, I am Yücel Özel. In this episode of the SORDUM series, we are experiencing a first. For those watching my video for the first time, I'm a cinematographer and freelance filmmaker. In my free time, I create niche content about filmmaking. If you follow my videos, I can produce more English content. Thanks for your support. For the first time, we are hosting a guest from abroad, Italian documentary filmmaker Francesco Sangalli. Francesco is a creative who has filmed in over 40 countries and produced documentaries under extreme conditions. He also stands out with his spec commercial projects. We are very grateful to him for sharing his vision and experiences with us. Now we turn it over to Francesco. How and when did your passion for documentary filmmaking in challenging and sometimes dangerous environments begin? What were the defining initial experiences that led you to this field?
I gradually approached to the world of documentaries. My first videos were about my bike trips in Italy and nights camping in the Alps, with a style much closer to vlogs than documentaries. Over time, little by little, I started filming myself less and focusing more on the world around me. So there wasn't a specific moment when I stopped doing one thing and started doing the other. Regarding when I started facing adventures in difficult conditions, well, that's been the case forever. I first slept in a tent when I was like this high, and from that moment on, I've always been drawn to everything that was outside my ordinary.
Speculative ads seem to be an important part of your strategy. Beyond building a portfolio, how do you choose your spec and concepts? And to what extent have these projects helped you to secure paid work, such as the gym promotion?
I shoot many spec ads because they are creativity labs. Personal projects are those where there's no paying client telling you what to do and what not to do. So that's why I shoot many spec ads and short documentaries. When it comes to themes, I always try to choose things that also interest me outside the video world. I like running, I like mountains, so shooting a spot for a trail running seemed like the best thing. I always use this approach for all my projects, also because telling a story about something I like is much easier for me than telling a story about something I have no interest in. Obviously, not all personal projects lead to paid work, but it happens more often than you might imagine. I started making documentaries for the Italian television, for example, precisely following a personal project of this kind. That's why I think spec ads, short films and short documentaries are the best tools that all filmmakers should invest in. They are much more important than the equipment you own, for example.
Do you have a specific mental technique or mindset you use to maintain your composure and focus in extremely stressful situations, like filming under Taliban fire? How do you manage yourself in those moments?
I believe that on a mental level, the most important thing of all is to be curious and respectful. Without these two attitudes, it's impossible to do this job. By being curious, I mean you always have to ask yourself, always, why? To any answer you get or anything that happens. The Taliban shoot at us? Why? Because they have a tendency to shoot before asking questions. Why? Because there has been war in Afghanistan for 50 years and almost all of them have only known violence. Why? Because the Soviet Union during the Cold War invaded Afghanistan. Why? And so on. Okay, you understood the process. You have always to ask why. When I say being respectful, I mean never judging what you see or what happens to you with blinders on. It would be easy to say the Taliban shoot at us because they are bad people. Obviously, they are not exactly the friendliest people in the world, but if you stopped at this point of the view, you would have an extremely limited vision.
In your videos, you emphasize the importance of both detailed planning and adapting to limitations. Can you share an example of projects where your initial plans changed significantly and how you creatively overcome that situation?
You always need a plan, and almost always that plan will fail. That's why you also need a plan B and a plan C. But this often isn't enough, and so you also need to know how to improvise to bring home the result.
Beyond general physical fitness, are there specific physical or mental training regimens you find most critical for the demanding requirements of your documentary assignments, like the Everest Base Camp project?
The most striking example that comes to my mind dates back to October 2024, when I was trekking to the Everest Base Camp in Nepal to document the ascent of one of the oldest men ever to reach it. Unfortunately, towards the beginning of the trek, the documentary's protagonist got injured and could no longer stand. I hadn't filmed enough to tell his story yet, so I had to improvise, following my instinct. Instinct told me to keep walking to the base camp, filming everything I saw and documenting the reactions of the group he was accompanying. In the end, therefore, what was supposed to be the story of one of the oldest men ever to reach the Everest Base Camp turned into a story a little bit different, and it was the story of how this man, even in his absence, managed to push a group of untrained people who didn't know each other to reach such a famous destination with such an important symbolic meaning.
We see you sometimes use minimalist kits in your projects. What is your core philosophy regarding equipment? Even if budgets weren't the primary constraint, what are the situations where a less is more approach is genuinely better?
My philosophy is very simple. Use the best equipment you have available. Everyone always focuses on the first part, best equipment, but the second part is the real key to understanding that you have available. That's why I often use minimalist setups, because I always want to have the camera available. Let's go back to the previous example of the Everest Base Camp. It would have been nice to shoot that documentary with Red's cameras, Blackmagic's, or Arris, or other cameras like this. But they weigh a lot, consume a lot of batteries, and a lot of memory cards. And during the trek to the base camp, not only does every kilogram have to be carried on your shoulders, so excess weight becomes a problem to manage, but you spend several days without electricity, therefore without the possibility of charging batteries or downloading footage. That's why, for that documentary, I used the Nikon Z8 with only 3 lenses. 24 to 120 f4, 17 to 28 f2.8, and 40mm f2. Then, obviously, when I have the opportunity, I use heavier and more accessorized cameras such as Reds, Blackmagic's, not Arris, but that kinds of cameras, prime lenses, large and powerful lights, and thousands of other things. But I never want to be a slave to the equipment. The equipment must be what allows me to tell the world's stories, not an obstacle.
How do you find the authentic stories you aim to tell in your documentary work, especially when traveling to new places? You mentioned over 40 countries. How does your story discovery process work?
When I travel, I usually start by buying a paper guidebook of the place I'm going to. Maybe I can show you some of them. I have plenty of guides here. Plenty of guides. These are just less than a half of the ones I have. It's a bit old school, I admit, but when I'm traveling, I like to read it, reread it, go back to the things I underlined and review them. And having the paper guidebook not only allows me to not be dependent on internet connection or electricity, but it also gives me a nicer feeling. I don't know how to explain it. And after that, I search online for blogs, websites, YouTube videos that talk about the nations and places I need to go, so as to look for interesting stories. For example, it was in this way that I discovered a former Italian photographer who, after having a very successful career in fashion, had moved to the Sahara Desert in Mauritania, literally in the middle of nowhere. He was ill. He discovered his illness when he was like 40. He had divorced from his former wife, and so he said, okay, now it was a degenerative illness, so there was no way for him to be better. And so he said, okay, I want to change everything, and he went there in the Sahara Desert. And I discovered him through a very, very small blog. I was reading, I think, there are no so many blogs about Mauritania, I think, but I was reading all of them, and so I found his story. And in his story, at the end, was a very big part of this documentary, structured in 3 episodes of 1 hour each. And the part we dedicated to him was like 30 minutes, 25 minutes, something like that. So everything thanks to a little blog I found searching everything I could online. And finally, the third way, so the first way, paper guidebook, the second way, online websites, YouTube videos, something like that. And finally, the third way, which is usually the most effective, so is to ask my guides and fixers all sorts of questions. Most of the time, truly incredible stories come out in this way.
Your channel is the build around continuous improvement. Would you share a significant project failure or unexpected challenge you faced in your career and the most valuable lesson you learned from it?
I don't like the word failure. I believe that nothing is ever truly a failure, but only a lesson. In this sense, therefore, I learn lessons practically every day. For example, the first time I was called to shoot interviews for a large documentary, the camera card had a problem and became corrupted, damaging the file of the interview. I was 22 years old, so quite young. It was the very first big opportunity for me, and I was obviously in a panic because, you know, I was thinking, okay, if this goes wrong, I can never be able to do this job anymore in my life. But there I said, okay, no, I don't have to panic. I have to learn to use programs for recovering corrupted files. And I did it. I delivered the interview late, yes, but by explaining the problem to the director, he understood that despite the problem, I hadn't stopped it, and I had found a solution as quickly as possible. The director, seeing my attitude, called me many other times because I had shown him that I was a problem solver, not a problem maker.
What does the message "let's keep exploring, creating and growing together," which often appears in your videos, personally mean to you? What kind of interaction or contribution do you hope to see from your channel community?
What I hope from my channel, my YouTube channel, is that people, by watching my videos, will become as passionate about this world as I have become. And that they will understand that if you commit 100% every day, it is possible to achieve more than satisfactory results. What I hope to get from the people, on the other hand, are subscribers and watch hours, watch time. Because I think YouTube can be the true future of the documentary world, offering directors and cinematographers much more freedom than other sharing platforms. Both for me and for my subscribers, you can't expect to achieve the results in a single day. All journeys, however long they may be, always begin with a step, right? So, in the same way, both I and the subscribers will have to try to improve every day to go as far as possible.
Looking ahead, what kinds of stories or challenging projects excite you the most? In line with your goal to improve every single day, what new skills are currently focused on developing?
The world has been fully explored. Animals and plants are almost all catalogued. Mountains and rivers have long been named. So, what stories remain to be told? For me, the answer lies in people. Human beings are incredibly varied and fascinating. There are 8 billion people on this earth right now. 8 billion individuals different from each other in language, culture, religion, tradition, habit, and many other things. Everyone has their passions, their difficulties, their desires, and everyone, for better or for worse, always has something to tell. That's why I would like to tell the most interesting and compelling stories of the people I meet. People driven by love and passion. Because in this world, which seems to be becoming increasingly focused on commerce and materialism, I believe that a little love and passion can only be good. What new skills am I trying to improve? I would say all of them, because there isn't a single aspect that I am truly satisfied with. I could and should be better with lighting, with audio, with directing, with editing, and every other thing. But if I had to choose one in particular, I think that lately the aspect I'm training the most is storytelling. A well-told story always holds up, even if everything else is a bit of it.
Once again, we thank Francesco Sangalli for his valuable contribution. The SORDUM series will continue to grow with creative filmmakers from both around the world and Turkey. If there are other creatives you would like us to talk to, don't forget to share them in the comments. See you in the next episodes. Kendine iyi bak, değer üret ve hoşça kal.